Grief is stupid. I don't mean that in a deep way. I mean it's literally stupid. It makes you dumb. You forget where you put your keys. You forget to eat. You stand in the shower for 40 minutes and can't remember if you use soap. You drive to the grocery store and sit in the parking lot and cry and then drive home without going inside. You open the fridge and stare into it like it owes you money. You lose entire days. Tuesday becomes Friday, and you have no idea where Wednesday went. Nobody warns you about that part. They tell you about the sadness and the anger and the stages or whatever. But nobody tells you that grief turns your brain into soup. My name is Dana. I'm 34. My husband Michael died 11 months ago, and I have been operating at maybe 15% capacity ever since. I'm going to tell you about the group. My therapist suggested it around month 3. I was in her office doing that thing where you talk without really saying anything, just filling the air with words so nobody has to sit in silence. She let me go for a while, and then she said she knew a small grief support group that met on Wednesday evenings at a community center near my apartment. 6 or 7 people. Very informal. No pressure to share. She said sometimes it helps to be around people who get it. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for 2 months. Then one Wednesday, I was sitting in my apartment at 6:30 in the evening, eating cereal out of the box and watching the ceiling fan go around, and I thought, this is pathetic, Dana. This is genuinely pathetic. Get in the car. I got in the car. The community center was a squat beige building wedged between a laundromat and a tax office. Inside, the hallway smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee. I followed handwritten signs that said grief support with an arrow, which felt like the world's most depressing scavenger hunt, and found a room with a circle of folding chairs and a table with cookies and a coffee urn. 5 people were already there. They looked up when I walked in, and I almost turned around and left, because being looked at by 5 strangers when you're at your lowest is a specific kind of hell. But a woman stood up and smiled and said, "Hi, come sit down. There's coffee." That was Janine. She ran the group. She was maybe 50, kind face, voice like a warm towel. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and had that energy of a woman who has survived some awful shit and come out the other side softer instead of harder. I liked her immediately, which I don't say about many people. The others, there was Paul, who was maybe 60, gray beard, flannel shirts, lost his wife to a stroke. Carla, early 40s, nervous energy, hands always moving, lost her teenage son in a drowning accident. There was Sam, late 20s, quiet, hood up most of the time, lost his girlfriend to suicide. And there was Ray, who sat slightly outside the circle and never said much. He was hard to read. Average looking, average age, average everything. He wore a jacket with the collar up, and he watched people the way some people watch television, attentive but removed. I couldn't figure out who he'd lost. He didn't offer, and nobody pushed. That first night I didn't say much. I sat and listened and drank bad coffee and ate 2 cookies that tasted like cardboard. And I felt, for the first time in months, like I was somewhere I was supposed to be. I came back the next Wednesday, and the one after that. Grief groups work in a weird way. You'd think sitting in a room full of sad people would make you sadder, but it doesn't. It's the opposite. There's a relief in not having to perform. Out in the world, people ask how you're doing, and you have to say fine, because the alternative is a 20-minute breakdown in a Starbucks. In the group, you don't have to say fine. You can say I woke up this morning and I couldn't remember why I should get out of bed. And 5 people will nod because they woke up feeling the exact same thing. I started sharing around week 4. I told them about Michael, how we met at a party where I didn't know anyone, and he was the only person not trying too hard. How he made me laugh so hard on our first date that water came out of my nose and I wanted to die of embarrassment. And he said it was the most charming thing he'd ever seen. How we got married in his parents' backyard because we couldn't afford a venue and it rained and it was perfect. How he sang in the shower every morning, badly, and I pretended to hate it. I told them about the accident. How the police showed up at my door on a Tuesday night while I was watching a cooking show and eating leftover pasta. How they said there'd been a collision on Route 9. How they said Michael's car had crossed the center line and hit an oncoming truck. How they said he died on impact. I didn't tell them about the last few months before the accident. I didn't tell them that things had been bad. Not violently bad. Not dramatically bad. Just the kind of bad that erodes a marriage from the inside, like water damage behind drywall. You can't see it, but the structure is rotting. I didn't tell them because it felt disloyal. You don't speak ill of the dead, especially when the dead is someone you loved, especially when the bad parts were complicated and mutual and didn't fit neatly into a story. If I'm being honest, I also didn't tell them because I didn't fully remember the bad parts. I remembered that things were difficult. I remembered sleeping in separate rooms sometimes. I remembered a particular heaviness in the house, a silence that wasn't peaceful, but pressurized. But the specific fights, the specific incidents, the specific reasons, those were blurry, smeared, like someone had taken a cloth to that part of my memory and rubbed until the details bled together into a general fog of something went wrong, but I couldn't tell you exactly what. I remember the officer's face. Young guy, couldn't have been more than 25. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. His partner stood behind him and didn't speak. They asked if there was someone they could call. I said no. They left. I sat on the couch and finished the pasta because I didn't know what else to do. The group listened to all of this without interrupting. When I finished, Janine said, "Thank you for sharing that, Dana." And Carla reached over and squeezed my hand. And that was it. No advice, no platitudes, no God's plan bullshit. Just acknowledgement. I cried in the car afterward, but it was a different kind of crying. It felt like something moving through me instead of sitting on me. Over the next few weeks, I learned everyone's stories. Paul's wife Helen had died in the kitchen making breakfast. Massive stroke, dead before she hit the floor. 41 years of marriage ended between the eggs and the toast. Paul told the story with a dark humor that I appreciated. He said Helen always hated cooking, and maybe this was her way of finally getting out of it. Nobody laughed, but I saw Sam crack half a smile. Carla's son Tyler was 15. He went swimming in a quarry with friends and didn't come back up. Carla told it factually, mechanically, like reading a police report. She said the hardest part wasn't the death itself, but the 3 days of searching before they found him. 3 days of not knowing, which she described as being trapped between two realities. The one where he's alive, and the one where he's not. And your mind refusing to commit to either one. Sam's girlfriend Ava had hanged herself in their apartment while Sam was at work. He found her. He didn't describe finding her, and nobody asked him to. All he said was, "I don't go into that room anymore." He'd been sleeping on the couch for 8 months. Ray didn't share for the first several weeks I was there. When Janine would gently offer him the floor, he'd shake his head or say, "I'm just here to listen tonight." Nobody pressed him. The group had a rule about that. You share when you're ready, and you might never be ready. And that's fine. But I noticed things about Ray. He was always the first one there and the last one to leave. He watched everyone with this careful, patient attention. When someone shared something painful, he didn't react the way the rest of us did. No wince, no sympathetic tilt of the head. He just absorbed it. And sometimes after someone finished talking, he'd ask a question that was so specific, so precisely targeted, that it would crack the person open in ways they clearly didn't expect. He asked Carla once if Tyler had left his shoes by the door before he went to the quarry. She looked at him like he'd slapped her, and then she started sobbing and said yes. His sneakers were by the front door for 2 weeks after, and she couldn't move them. She hadn't mentioned the shoes before. How did Ray know to ask about them? He asked Paul if Helen had said anything that morning before the stroke, and Paul went quiet, and then said yeah. She'd said, "I had the strangest dream," and never got to finish the sentence. Paul had never told anyone that. He asked Sam if Ava had sent any messages before she did it. Sam said she sent him a text that said, "I put your dinner in the fridge," and nothing else. Sam had never mentioned the text before. Ray nodded like he already knew what it said. I found this unsettling, but I also found it effective. Ray's questions unlocked things in people that months of sharing hadn't touched. He had a precision about him that was almost clinical. I started to wonder if he was a therapist himself, or a counselor, sitting in on the group to study how it worked. One night after a session, I was walking to my car, and Ray was in the parking lot, leaning against a gray sedan, looking at his phone. He glanced up as I passed. "Dana." I stopped. It was the first time he'd said my name outside the circle. "Do you drive Michael's car?" he asked, casually, like asking about the weather. "No, I drive mine. His was totaled in the accident." "Right. Of course." He nodded, put his phone away, and got in his car. I stood there for a minute feeling like something had just happened that I didn't have the equipment to understand. The next session, he asked me if I was handy, if I knew my way around an engine. I laughed and said no. That was Michael's thing. He was always under the hood of something. I could barely change a tire. Ray just nodded. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about the question and felt a strange discomfort that I couldn't place, like hearing a wrong note in a song but not being able to identify which instrument played it. I also started noticing my own behavior more, small things that didn't make sense. I had a recurring dream where I was standing in a driveway. Not always mine, sometimes a driveway I didn't recognize, and my hands were dirty. Not mud dirty, grease dirty, oil and metal. I'd wake up from these dreams and check my hands and they'd be clean, obviously. But the feeling lingered. That phantom grease between my fingers. I mentioned the dreams to Janine once, offhandedly, and she got very still. She asked me how often I had them. I said 2 or 3 times a week. She asked when they started. I thought about it and realized they'd started before Michael died. I'd been having them for years. That realization made me feel cold in a way I couldn't explain. Around week 8, I started noticing something else. The stories were shifting. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would be obvious if you weren't paying close attention. But I was paying close attention because the group had become my lifeline. The only thing I looked forward to all week, and I hung on every word. Paul had originally said Helen died on a Saturday morning. Then, in a later session, he mentioned it happening on a Sunday. Small thing. Could be misremembering. But then Carla described finding Tyler's shoes by the front door. Except when she first told the story. She said the quarry was a spontaneous trip, and he left in his shoes. Now they were by the door, which meant he left barefoot, which didn't make sense for a kid walking to a quarry. Sam's story shifted too. The first time he told it, Ava's text said, "I put your dinner in the fridge." A few weeks later, when he referenced it again, he said the text said, "I left something for you." Close enough that you might not notice. But I noticed, because "I put your dinner in the fridge" is the kind of specific, mundane detail that sticks in your brain and doesn't change. I started writing things down after sessions, bullet points in a notebook, names, dates, details. I felt a little crazy doing it, like I was fact-checking my friend's grief. But something was off, and I needed to know what. My own story started to feel wrong too. Not the facts. The facts were the same. Michael died on Route 9, car crossed the center line, hit a truck. But the texture of the memory was changing. I used to remember exactly what I was watching on TV when the police came. It was a cooking show, specifically a baking competition, the one where they make elaborate cakes. Now, when I reached for that memory, the TV was showing something else. A news broadcast. No, that didn't feel right either. The memory had the quality of a photograph left in the sun. The image was still there, but the colors were bleeding. I mentioned it to the group one Wednesday, tentatively. I said, "Does anyone else feel like their memories are getting, I don't know, slippery?" Paul nodded slowly. "I keep mixing up the morning Helen died with other mornings, like the details are coming unglued." Carla said, "I used to be able to picture Tyler's face so clearly. Now sometimes I see him and he looks different, like someone drew him from memory instead of a photograph." Sam didn't say anything. Ray didn't say anything either, but he was watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. After that session, I went home and pulled up the accident report on my laptop. I'd requested a copy months ago, and it had been sitting in my downloads folder untouched because I couldn't bring myself to read it. Now I opened it. The details were familiar. Route 9, Tuesday evening. Michael's car, a silver Honda Civic, crossed the center line and struck a westbound truck. The driver of the truck sustained minor injuries. Michael was pronounced dead at the scene. Standard stuff. Horrible, clinical standard. But one detail caught me. The report listed the time of the accident as 5:47 p.m. That was wrong. The police came to my door at night. It was dark. I was eating dinner and watching TV. It had to be 8 or 9 at least. If the accident happened at 5:47, why did it take 3 hours for anyone to tell me? I told myself there could be reasons. Processing, paperwork, finding next of kin. 3 hours isn't unreasonable for a bureaucratic process, but it felt wrong. It felt like finding a thread on a sweater. You could leave it alone, or you could pull it, and pulling it might unravel everything. I pulled it. I called the police department the next morning and asked to speak with someone about the accident report. They transferred me around for 20 minutes before I got a woman who was helpful. I gave her the case number and asked about the timeline. She pulled it up and said the responding officers were dispatched to notify next of kin at approximately 6:15 p.m. 6:15. Not 8 or 9. 6:15. Less than 30 minutes after the accident. That can't be right, I said. It was dark when they came. I was eating dinner. Ma'am, it's possible the time on the notification log is approximate. It was dark outside. It was nighttime. 6:15 in the evening in that part of the year. The sun is still up. She couldn't explain the discrepancy. She suggested I might be misremembering due to the trauma. I thanked her and hung up. I wasn't misremembering. I knew it was dark, because when the officer stood on my porch, the porch light was on behind him, and there were moths circling it. You don't notice moths at 6:15 in the evening, because there's still daylight. I remember the moths because I stared at them while the officer talked, because looking at him was too hard. Something else bothered me that I didn't bring to the group. I had always remembered being alone in the house when the police came. Just me, the couch, the TV. But recently, when I reached for the memory, there was a smell attached to it that didn't belong. Not pasta, not cooking, something chemical, like cleaning solution, industrial, strong, the kind that burns your nostrils. Why would my house smell like industrial cleaner on a random Tuesday evening? And there was something with my hands. In the memory, the official version, the one I'd been carrying around for nearly a year, my hands were clean, normal, holding a fork. But sometimes, in that half-asleep state right before you fully drift off, I'd flash on a different version. My hands under running water, scrubbing hard, the way you scrub when something won't come off. Hot water, so hot my skin was red. And then the memory would skip, like a scratched DVD, and I'd be back on the couch with the fork. I didn't tell anyone about the hands. I didn't know how to talk about something I wasn't sure I remembered. I brought the time discrepancy to the group. Not the specific detail about the time. I wasn't ready to share that. But the general feeling that my memories of that night were unreliable. I said I was starting to doubt my own timeline. Janine leaned forward and said something that should have comforted me, but instead made me deeply uneasy. She said, "Trauma doesn't store memories the way normal experience does. Your brain was in survival mode. It's completely normal for the timeline to feel scrambled." That made sense. It was true, probably. But it was also what someone would say if they wanted you to stop looking. The following Wednesday, Carla wasn't at the group. Janine said she was taking a break. The week after that, Sam wasn't there either. Hood up, quiet Sam, who'd been there every single week since before I joined. Gone. Janine said he needed some time. I texted Carla. She responded, said she was okay, just needed to step back for a bit. Her message was warm but brief. I texted Sam. No response. Not that day, not the next, not ever. I asked Paul if he'd heard from either of them. He said Carla had called him, and they'd talked for a while. He was vague about what they discussed. When I pushed, he changed the subject so fast it felt like a door slamming. Something was contracting, The group was shrinking and I didn't know why, and the people who remained were behaving differently. Paul would start to say something and then stop, glancing at Ray like he was checking whether he was allowed. Janine had started bringing a notebook to sessions, which she never did before. She'd write things down when I spoke. I caught her doing it once, and she closed the notebook immediately. I wanted to feel paranoid. I wanted to tell myself I was reading too much into normal behavior. But I couldn't, because every instinct I had was screaming that these people knew something about me that I didn't know about myself. Now it was just me, Paul, Janine, and Ray. The room felt bigger with fewer people. The silences were longer. Paul seemed different, more nervous, less prone to his dark humor. He kept glancing at Ray. Ray, for his part, was exactly the same. Patient, attentive, asking his precise, devastating questions. He asked me that night, for the first time, a direct question about Michael's death. "The night the police came to your door," he said, "what were you doing right before you answered? What were you eating?" "Leftover pasta." "What kind?" I paused. "What?" "What kind of pasta?" Penne with marinara." "And you were eating it in the living room?" "Yes." "On the couch?" "Yes." "Where was the plate when you answered the door?" I opened my mouth to say on the coffee table, but the memory slid sideways. The plate wasn't on the coffee table. It was in the kitchen. No, it was on the couch. No, there was no plate. I was eating out of the pot. Wait. Was I eating at all? Was I watching TV? Was I even in the living room? "I don't remember," I said, and I felt something cold settle into my chest, because this was a simple question about a simple moment, and I had been so certain of it for 11 months, and now the certainty was gone. Ray nodded, not sympathetically, not clinically, just nodded, like I'd confirmed something he expected. "Why are you asking me that?" I said. "Because you describe that evening the same way every time," he said, "and every time the details are slightly different." Janine stepped in. "Ray, let's not." "She deserves to know," Ray said quietly. "Know what?" I said. Ray looked at Janine. Janine looked at her hands. Paul was staring at the floor. "Know what?" I said again, louder. Janine spoke first. Her warm towel voice was strained now, like she was holding something heavy. "Dana, can I ask you something? And I need you to hear the whole question before you respond." "Fine. When the officers came to your door that night, can you remember what they looked like?" I could. I could see the young officer's face, his discomfort, his partner standing behind him silent and stoic. I described them. Janine nodded. "And you said the porch light was on, and there were moths." "Yes." "And it was dark." "Yes." "Dana, what month did Michael die?" "March." Janine paused. "Do you get moths in March?" The cold thing in my chest expanded. She was right. March. Early March. Still cold. There wouldn't be moths. Moths come in summer. Why did I remember moths? I might be mixing up memories. That doesn't mean... "You told us Michael died on a Tuesday," Paul said suddenly, his voice rough. "The accident report says it was a Thursday." No, it doesn't. I read the report. It says Tuesday. Read it again, Paul said. I pulled up the PDF on my phone right there in the session. My hands were shaking. I scrolled to the date. Thursday, March 8th. Thursday. I had been saying Tuesday for 11 months. I had been certain it was Tuesday. I could feel the Tuesdayness of it, the particular flavor of a Tuesday evening, the rhythms of a Tuesday routine. But the report said Thursday, and a police report doesn't get the day of the week wrong. This is what I was talking about, I said, trying to steady my voice. My memories are slippery. This is what trauma does. Yes, Janine said carefully. It is. But Dana, I want you to think about something. You've been coming here for almost 3 months. In that time, you've told us about Michael's death at least a dozen times. And each time, the details change. Not the big facts. Not Route 9. Not the truck. Not the center line. But everything around it. The day of the week. The time. What you were doing. What was on TV. Whether the lights were on. Whether you were alone. Whether I was alone? Of course I was alone. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Wasn't I? Janine looked at Ray. Something passed between them that I couldn't read. Let's take a break, Janine said. 5 minutes. Bathroom, coffee, whatever you need. I didn't move. Paul went to the bathroom. Janine busied herself with the coffee urn. Ray sat in his chair, still, watching. Who are you? I asked him. He looked at me for a long time. What do you think I am? I think you're not here to grieve. I think you're here to watch. You're right about the second part. Are you a therapist? No. Then what? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a card. He placed it on the empty chair between us. I leaned forward and picked it up. It was a business card. Simple dark blue text on white stock. Raymond Kowalski. Detective, Homicide Division. My vision narrowed. The room seemed to pull away from me, like I was looking at everything through the wrong end of a telescope. No, I said. Dana. No, I don't understand. Homicide? Michael died in a car accident. I know that's what you believe. That's what happened. It's in the accident report. You can read it yourself. Center line. Truck. Impact. That's what happened. Read the report again, Dana. Read the last page. I had only read the first page. The summary. I'd never scrolled further because the summary was enough. It was more than enough. Why would I read 7 pages about how my husband died when the first page already told me everything I could handle? I scrolled. Page 2 was a diagram of the intersection. Page 3 was the truck driver's statement. Page 4 was witness statements. I didn't know there were witnesses. Page 5 was a toxicology report. Page 6 was photographs that I swiped past immediately because I wasn't ready and might never be ready. Page 7 was a supplementary report, an addendum filed 6 weeks after the initial report. The first line read, "Case reclassified from motor vehicle accident to suspicious death pending further investigation." I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. "What does this mean?" I whispered. "Keep reading," Ray said. The supplementary report detailed findings from a secondary examination of Michael's vehicle. The initial assessment had concluded mechanical failure, a stuck accelerator, possibly caused by a floor mat interfering with the pedal. The secondary examination found that the accelerator cable had been deliberately tampered with. The floor mat had been repositioned to conceal the modification. The brake lines showed evidence of scoring, not severed, but weakened, enough to fail under pressure. Someone had made Michael's car into a weapon and pointed it at the first oncoming thing it could hit. I set the phone down on my lap. The room was spinning, not metaphorically. The walls were actually tilting, the floor rising toward me, my inner ear failing. "Who?" I said. Ray didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at the floor. "The night Michael died," he said, "you told the responding officers you were home alone, eating dinner, watching TV. I was. Dana, there's security camera footage from your neighbor's Ring doorbell. It covers part of your driveway. At 4:30 that afternoon, 90 minutes before the accident, it shows you outside your house. You're at Michael's car. The hood is up. The room tilted. Not dramatically, not the way it does in stories. Just a slight lean, like the floor had decided to be at a different angle. I gripped the armrests of my chair. That's not... I don't... You're at the car for 11 minutes. Then you go back inside. 20 minutes later, Michael comes home from work. He goes inside for about 10 minutes. Then he comes back out, gets in the car, and drives away. That's the last time he was seen alive. I don't remember that. I know you don't. I would never. The camera footage is time-stamped and unedited. It's been verified by 3 independent analysts. I tried to think. I tried to summon the memory of that afternoon. March 8th. A Thursday, apparently, not a Tuesday. What was I doing at 4:30 on a Thursday? I was home. I think I was home. I was always home by then. Was I inside? Was I watching TV? Was I cooking? The afternoon before my husband died should be burned into my memory like a brand, but it was just fog. White, featureless, impenetrable fog. The same fog that covered the evening, that wrapped around the police visit, that turned everything before and after the knock on the door into something soft and negotiable. 11 minutes under the hood of his car. What takes 11 minutes? Checking the oil takes 2. Jumping a battery takes 5. What took me 11 minutes and required me to have knowledge I told everyone I didn't have? Then someone else. It must have been someone else at the car. It's you, Dana. The footage is clear enough for facial identification. It's you. I couldn't breathe. My lungs were working, but the air wasn't going anywhere. It was filling my throat and stopping, like a plug. That's not possible, I said, and I meant it. I wasn't performing denial. I genuinely, completely, wholly meant it. I could not have done that. I did not do that. I loved Michael. I loved him more than anything I've ever loved in my life, and I did not tamper with his car, and I did not kill him. I know it doesn't feel possible, Ray said. That's why I've been here for 3 months. That's why this group exists. I looked at Janine. She was standing by the coffee urn with tears on her face. The group, I said. Janine wiped her eyes. It's real, Dana. The people are real. But it wasn't random. I'm a forensic psychologist. Ray contacted me after the investigation stalled because you genuinely had no memory of what you did. He'd never seen anything like it. Complete dissociative amnesia, specific to the event. You weren't lying. You weren't covering. You actually don't remember. Paul, Carla, Sam. Real people. Real grief. But they were chosen because their stories had specific elements that we thought might trigger recall. Paul's wife dying suddenly in the kitchen. Domestic space, no warning. Carla's son. The element of water. Submersion. Things under the surface. Sam's girlfriend. Premeditation disguised as something else. I felt sick. You used them. They volunteered. They knew what the group was for. They got genuine support too. That part was real. But yes, there was a second purpose. And the stories changing. The dates shifting. That wasn't my memory failing. Ray answered. Your memory has been constructing a narrative since the day it happened. Every time you tell the story, it edits itself. It adjusts the timeline, moves details around, builds a version you can live with. The inconsistencies aren't your memory failing. They're your memory working very hard to keep you away from what actually happened. And the moths, I said, and the Tuesday, and the pasta. None of those details are real. They're set dressing. Your mind built a scene. Normal evening, normal dinner. Police arrive with bad news. A scene where you're a person who was home doing nothing when tragedy struck. Every time we got close to the real scene, your mind added another layer of insulation. What's the real scene? Ray and Janine exchanged another look. You don't have to do this right now, Janine said. Tell me what you think happened. Ray spoke slowly. Based on the evidence, and on 11 months of listening to your memory try to process this, here's what we believe. You and Michael were having problems. Significant problems. There were things happening in your marriage that you have also blocked. Things we can discuss later if you're ready. On the afternoon of March 8th, you did something to his car. We believe you were in a dissociative state when you did it, that you were not fully conscious or in control. This isn't a legal defense. It's a clinical observation. After he left and the accident happened, your mind sealed the entire episode. It built a replacement memory. A normal evening, a knock on the door, a tragedy that came from outside. And that's the version you've been living in ever since. I sat there. The folding chair was hard against my back. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The cookies on the table looked like they always looked. Dry, store-bought, nobody's idea of good food. Everything in the room was exactly the same as it had been an hour ago, and nothing was the same. I need to ask you something, I said. Yes. When you asked your questions, when you asked Paul about Helen's last words, and Carla about Tyler's shoes, and Sam about Ava's text, were you testing me? Seeing how I reacted to specific types of details? Yes. And when their stories started changing, when Paul said Sunday instead of Saturday, when the text message changed, was that part of it too? Janine answered. That was natural. Memories genuinely are unstable, especially traumatic ones. We noticed theirs shifting, and we noticed yours shifting, and the difference was that theirs shifted randomly. Yours shifted in one direction, away from certain details, always away. Every edit your memory made moved you further from the car, further from the driveway, further from the afternoon. You've been studying me. We've been trying to help you remember Those aren't the same thing. No, Ray said. They're not. Paul came back from the bathroom. He stood in the doorway, looking at me with an expression that I now understood wasn't nervousness. It was guilt. He knew what was happening tonight. They all knew. This was always where it was heading. 3 months of cookies and coffee and sharing circles, and this was the destination. Paul, I said, is Helen real? Helen was real. She died the way I said, but I knew what the group was. I agreed to be here. Did you feel sorry for me? Paul sat down heavily in his chair. Yeah, kid. I did. I do. Something in me broke. Not the way things break with a crack, more like the way ice breaks on a river. Silently, in pieces, spreading outward from a single point. I stood up. My legs felt like someone else's. I picked up my bag. I walked toward the door. Dana, Ray said behind me, I'm not going to arrest you tonight. That's not what this is. We need to talk more. There are things you need to know and decisions that need to be made, but not tonight. I stopped but didn't turn around. There are options, Janine said. Legal options, therapeutic options. This isn't the end of anything. This is the beginning of you understanding what happened. I don't understand anything, I said. I know. I loved him. I know you did. Then how could I? My voice cracked and I pressed my hand over my mouth to hold in whatever sound was trying to escape. That's what we're going to figure out, Janine said, if you'll let us. I stood there. I thought about the dreams, my hands covered in grease. I thought about the chemical smell in the house that didn't belong to any memory I trusted. I thought about Ray asking me if I was handy, if I knew my way around an engine, and the way I laughed and said no. That was Michael's thing. But it wasn't just Michael's thing. I knew that now, standing in the doorway. I knew it the way you know something you've always known, but wouldn't let yourself see. My dad was a mechanic. I grew up in his garage. I could change brake pads before I could drive. I told Ray I could barely change a tire, and that was a lie. And I didn't know it was a lie when I said it. How much of what I believed about myself was constructed? How many of the things I said I couldn't do were things I actually could, but my mind had sealed away because knowing I could do them was one step closer to knowing what I did? I walked out of the room and down the hallway and through the front door and into the parking lot. The air was cold. November. No moths. I stood next to my car and looked up at the sky and tried to find a single thing I could be certain of. My name is Dana. That's real. I'm 34. That's real. My husband Michael is dead. That's real. Everything else, every memory, every detail, every moment of the last 11 months is a story I told myself to survive, and the story is falling apart, and underneath it is something I'm not sure I can look at. I drove home. I sat in the driveway with the engine running. The headlights illuminated the garage door. Behind that door, in the garage, on the shelf next to the toolbox, there were things I hadn't looked at in 11 months. Michael's things. A box I packed in the first week and shoved up there and never touched. I turned off the engine. I went inside. I didn't go into the garage. I sat on the couch where I'd told myself I was sitting when the police came. The TV was off. The room was dark. I tried to reach for the real memory, the one that had been hiding behind the fake one for 11 months. I tried to feel it. I got fragments, not a complete picture. Flashes, the driveway, the hood of the car, my hands on something I shouldn't have been touching. A sound, not the police at the door, but a sound from before that. A phone ringing. Not the doorbell. The phone. Someone calling to tell me there'd been an accident. And the feeling, the very specific, undeniable, devastating feeling of already knowing. Already knowing. Not the way you know something because you predicted it. Not the way you know the ending of a movie because you've seen this type before. Knowing the way you know because you set the sequence in motion and you've been waiting in some sealed-off basement of your mind for the phone to ring and confirm that it worked, because I'd done it. The thought arrived without fanfare. No dramatic revelation, no movie moment. Just a quiet settling, like sediment reaching the bottom of a glass. The truth was under everything I'd built, and it was small and plain and terrible. I looked down at my hands, clean, soft. A woman's hands that she claimed couldn't change a tire. These hands that had been under a hood on a Thursday afternoon in March, doing something they absolutely knew how to do, guided by knowledge I'd disowned so completely that I would have passed a lie detector test when I said I barely knew what a brake line was. I thought about the group, about Paul and his dead wife and his dark humor, about Carla and her drowned son and the shoes by the door, about Sam and his dead girlfriend and the text message. All of them real, all of them actually grieving, and all of them recruited to sit in a circle with a woman who killed her husband and watch her lie to herself week after week without knowing she was lying. Did they resent me? Were they disgusted, sitting there listening to me cry about Michael while knowing what I'd done? Or did they see what Janine and Ray saw? A person so broken by her own actions that her mind performed emergency surgery on itself, amputating the memory of the act and cauterizing the wound with a fabricated reality? I don't know which is worse, being hated or being pitied. Both, probably. Deserving both. I picked up my phone. I opened the contacts. I scrolled to Ray Kowalski's card, which I'd photographed before I left. I typed a text message. I'll come back next Wednesday. He responded in under a minute. We'll be there. I set the phone down. I pulled my knees up to my chest. The house was silent the way it had been silent for 11 months. The silence of a space that used to hold 2 people and now holds 1. And the reasons for that are not what you thought they were. And the person you've been grieving for is someone you killed. And the person who killed him is someone you don't remember being. And the life you've been living since is a house built on nothing. And it's sinking. And there is no floor underneath. I sat in the dark for a long time. I keep thinking about what Janine said. That my memory was working, not failing. That every lie it told me was an act of protection. That some part of my brain decided the truth was unsurvivable. So it built me a survivable version and moved me into it and closed the door. I wonder what else is behind that door. What other rooms are in there that I've never opened? What other versions of me are sitting in the dark, doing things I'll never remember, protecting me from truths I can't hold? I wonder if the Dana who's writing this is the real one, or another layer, another set, another room built on top of the one below, which is built on top of the one below that. I wonder how deep it goes. I wonder if there's a bottom. Wednesday is in 4 days. I'll go back to the group. I'll sit in the folding chair and drink the bad coffee and eat the cardboard cookies, and I'll try to look at whatever they need me to look at. But right now I'm sitting on the couch in the dark, and somewhere in my head a door is opening that was sealed shut for 11 months. And behind it is something I did on a Thursday afternoon in March. And I can feel it coming toward me like a train on tracks I laid myself. I don't know what's on the other side of remembering. I'm afraid it might be another forgetting.